Hello everybody! So don't mind me, I'm just getting this all set up, ready to go. So I just came swooping in because the trouble is though, computer's over there, camera's here. Camera's here where it usually is. I'm using an Elgato cam link, so don't mind me while I'm just miking myself up. So yeah, we're gonna go in a couple of minutes, just kind of allow some people to get in. Don't know why I'm looking over there. Should be looking over here because you're there. So, welcome everyone. I have my Surface, my trusty Surface, right here to help me with my endeavours. So let me know whether the can you guys hear me okay? Just want to know whether everything's all okay, all good. Might have to tweak the yeah, I might just make it ultra low latency. It might be a little bit late in the game though. But then again, I think it should be alright because we don't need anything high pressure right now. From the looks of it, I'm just looking at the microphone right now. Nobody seems to be, yeah, it seems to be okay. You guys are talking. Alright. Cool. Just making sure. We're starting a little early, I know, so this is all just kind of the prep work, getting everything ready to go. So, I know, yeah, you can hear it right? Ah, sweet, cool. But yeah, don't worry guys, everything's gonna be okay. We're just starting a little bit early, getting everything, so that means we can know that everything is mic'd up all well. You guys can hear me, that's good. Now, for those of you who don't know, a couple of months ago, I did a storytime thing using similar equipment to this, in fact, exactly the same equipment to this, and I did the first 9 chapters of the novelization of What If Gine Went with Goku to Earth, done by Megane-chan 720. And I remember finding this like a couple of days beforehand, and I just found it so astonishingly good. So fascinating, I just had to stream it. She did a really good job with it, and thankfully, she has continued with it. The reason why I didn't do all 10 chapters is because I wanted to like save some and wait for some more. So we're going to be doing the rest of the chapters. There's about 8 chapters, goes up to chapter 17. And I'll be sure to have a link somewhere in the comments afterwards. But either way, yeah, if you can leave a super chat, that would be fantastic, because I am looking to build up my sim racing gear, and that will definitely help so we can provide more streaming content on Twitch when I'm not doing Dragon Ball stuff. So, just so you know, super chats would be very most welcome. But I see that we have some already. Megane-chan actually offers a super chat herself, saying, "Enjoy the stream, guys. I'll be at work, sulking." Oh, sorry about that, Megane, but don't worry. And for those of you who are worried that you might miss some of it, it's all going to be archived later on. It'll be a proper video in of itself, and you can check it out later. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Do I have a drink with me? No, I'm going to go it dry, because I feel like I'm already hydrated, and I really don't want to risk having to go to pee during the middle of the stream. So I don't want to have that happen. Sans Ventura with a big super chat, thank you. Had a little question. If you were brought into Toei to come up with an arc that would incorporate every facet of DB, Hero Xenoverse, a real Crisis on Infinite storytelling, how would you run that show? Well, I suppose I can answer that quickly. Well, one thing I really admire Toyotaro doing in the manga right now is using vertical character building. And what I mean by vertical is using stuff that already exists in Dragon Ball, not just create a new character, a new species, a new planet with new civilization, because we don't hold that in much regard. So I like what they're doing with using like different Zarbonians and stuff like that, and Pui Pui, making more of them, meaning that they actually get to see more of that same kind of people. That's fantastic. I just do more of that. Use stuff that's already existing in the show so people can go, oh yeah, that was that thing from Z. Just, it connects everything together. So that's what I would say. Don't just make brand new types of characters and civilizations just because. So that's pretty much what I would do. And exactly, Broly Brolyson says Charlotte. Exactly, that's Charlotte. You know, that's a good example. Molly Shadow says, hey, looking forward to this all day. Well, don't worry, we're going to be starting this very shortly. And Snow Miser asks, what are your personal favourite what if that I've done? In terms of the what if, I would have to say it would be... Oh, I don't know. I actually don't know. Lately, it's been the Freezer turned good stuff, because I'm really enjoying where that's going. And next Saturday, not this coming Saturday, but the Saturday after that, it's going to be part 4. So you can look forward to that. I'm really looking forward to that. So, again, do expect that. But we're going to have Cell turned good on Saturday, so that's going to be just as good, and I like that one too. But yeah, super chats if you can, but let's get rolling. And if you do leave a super chat, I'll discuss them during the breaks in chapters. But anyway, here we go. Chapter 10, Gine and Gohan, Part 1. Ma, the baby's coming! Gine looked up from where she was weeding the garden to see Kakarot running full pelt towards her, looking more scared and panicked than she had ever seen him look in his life. She stood abruptly, and he took one last step over her plants and landed in front of her, ploughing up a small scar in the earth in his haste. "What the hell do you mean the baby's coming?" she demanded, even as he grabbed her arm and dragged her towards the house. "It's already here, inside your wife's stomach, you idiot! We told you that over and over." "I don't know," Kakarot shrieked. "All I know is Chi-Chi's hurting real bad, and she says the baby's coming." That wasn't good. Saiyans usually had easy pregnancies, but the doctor had made sure to tell her that if she ever started to hurt, she should come see them, because that meant something was very wrong. Gine had made it to both birth appointments without experiencing any pain whatsoever, but she had heard of women who get really sick because the baby had gone wrong and died inside of them. When Kakarot flung the door off its hinges and dragged her to the bedroom to see bloody sheets and Chi-Chi doubled over and screaming, Gine wasted no time. She scooped her daughter-in-law up in her arms and made it as far as the front door before Gohan flung himself in front of her arms wide. "Put her down, my dear," he said sternly. "She needs to stay in bed." "She needs to go to the hospital!" Gine shouted, a redness creeping into the edges of her vision. She loved Gohan like the father she had never known, but she would knock his head off his shoulders if he continued to stand in her way. "Ma, for heaven's sake, put me down!" Chi-Chi grunted, breathing heavily. "This is really uncomfortable!" She groaned and squeezed her eyes shut, gripping Gine's arm so tightly it almost hurt. "You're hurting and you're bleeding," Gine said urgently, trying to dance around Gohan in the doorway. "That means you need a doctor!" "The midwife's already on her way," Ox King said, as infuriatingly calm as Gohan. "Gramps, can't you see she's hurting?" Kakarot pled with Gohan. "Put me down this instant or so help me!" Chi-Chi roared, but before she could finish the sentence, another wave of pain shuddered through her, and she stuffed the collar of her nightgown into her mouth and screamed. "We need to wait for the midwife," Gohan was telling Kakarot. Gine finally hooked her ankle around the old man's leg and dropped him to the floor, striding out of the yard with her daughter-in-law in her arms, and was in the act of bending her knees to take to the sky before she noticed the person standing on the path just outside the house. Here I am, the wizened old woman said calmly. "My, you young people can be so impatient." It turned out that while Earth babies could be removed surgically, usually they simply came out of the way they went in. And yes, a little blood and a lot of pain was completely normal. Chi-Chi had a strong body and wide hips, and the baby was positioned correctly, so there was no reason to think that this would be anything other than textbook. The midwife, a sweet old woman with sure hands and a wealth of knowledge, explained everything to her with godlike patience as she coaxed her into putting Chi-Chi back down on the bed. And Gine swallowed down her horror the best she could during the swift education. Almost my place now. The thought that her ancestors had unlikely gone the same process before regen tanks came into widespread use made her wonder why there are any Saiyans left at all. She had no time for this kind of pondering, however, as the only one Chi-Chi wanted in the room while she laboured beside the midwife was Gine. Gine had no idea why. Apparently she knew less about how birth worked than Grandpa Gohan. The unhurried, unworried fashion in which the midwife bustled around the house, preparing this or that, and checking on Chi-Chi periodically, made her feel mightily stupid. And she wasn't very much enjoying being forced to listen to her daughter-in-law's agony while not being allowed to do anything about it. On second thought, this arrangement was probably for the best. Kakarot had been taken out into the woods by his grandfather, and Gine thought if the poor boy were here to hear her mate's screams, he might as well lose it. Gine wondered silently as the hours went on and nothing seemed to change. If any baby could be possibly worth this, did it matter how cute the thing might be if she was just going to look at it and remember the screams and the blood that resulted in it? She knew there was no room left in her heart for babies anyway. What little space Kakarot didn't take up was reserved for a child she would never see again. This little half-human thing, probably a sterile hybrid if it was even healthy, couldn't possibly compare. Chi-Chi gave one last deep groan, and the midwife leaned forward, her deeply wrinkled face furrowed even deeper in concentration. A minute later, tiny lungs inflated for the first time, and a high-pitched wailing filled the room. Gine found herself back in time, standing over a Saiyan pod, steeling herself to send her child out into the universe to face an unknown fate by himself. He was crying. The baby was crying, yelling as though his little heart would break, and she could not make herself turn away. "It's the boy!" the midwife announced proudly. "Ah!" Chi-Chi sighed, leaning back on the pillows. The noise was mostly one of relief, although oddly it held a slight note of disappointment. "Were you hoping for a girl?" the midwife asked kindly, busy with the infant, doing things Gine couldn't see. Chi-Chi lolled her head over to look at her mother-in-law, eyes bright with exhaustion. "I was hoping to name him after you," she said. Something inside Gine's chest expanded, nearly to bursting, leaving her choked and breathless, her eyes stinging with tears. The midwife handed a small bundle of blankets to Chi-Chi, and both women looked down at the tiny babe, squalling with displeasure and utterly beautiful. "Did you have a name picked out for a boy?" the midwife asked. Neither woman took their eyes from the child. "No," Chi-Chi said. "I was convinced it was going to be a girl. I was named after my grandmother, and I wanted this little one to be too. Don't tell my pa, but I don't exactly want to name a boy after him." Gine chuckled. She and the Ox King had bonded over their love for their children, as well as amusement at said children's early efforts to play matchmaker. But she didn't think his name was really suitable for passing on either. She reached out and placed the tip of her forefinger into the baby's palm, and he clutched it with all his strength. "What about naming him after Gohan?" she said, and she could see Chi-Chi smile out of the corner of her eye. "Gohan," she said, testing it out. "That's perfect." That's chapter 10. Nice bonding start, I'd say. Let's get this next chapter. Oop. There we go. Let's get things down. Let's see. Okay, cool. We've got Sans Ventura in again. What would be your final DB arc? The arc to end all arcs. The final story in Dragon Ball. What would you do to let this series go out with a bang? Well, for starters, if I had the choice, I would have a final encounter with Beerus. Beerus versus Vegeta. Well, no, Beerus versus Vegeta, I would say. That is the ultimate conclusion. Vegeta finding out that it was Beerus that was responsible for the planet Vegeta being destroyed. He needs closure. Not for the race and the Saiyans and stuff like that, but for himself. That would be the ultimate means of victory. And they would win. Pretty much, that's what I would do. Joe the Medical. Can't wait for the What Infinity. Also, what if everyone who fought Goku turned good? Except the usual ones who can't turn good. I don't know, actually. But I think, really, for the most part, it's just, they're all redemption arcs in a way, I would say. Red Dragon Force 2, Akane versus Melodious in a cooking contest. Who lives? Oh, I don't really know who they are. In what context? I could be making a grave mistake, but I'll try and fix it before the next part, or by the end of the next chapter read. Yeah. All I would say is that if it's a little too loud, I would just say turn down your settings and stuff like turn down the volume. I mean, I can go down and maybe just check on the volume. Just 1 second. Let's just... Alright, okay. Turned it down by a couple of decibels. Let's see how that works. Okay, here we go. That should hopefully sort it out somewhat. It should do. Alright. Neo Anime Freak, don't worry, R&R is being worked on. We will hopefully have it out by the end of the month. Yeah, we're done with character art almost. We just need a few bits of background stuff and then we'll be good to go. Grant Emil, how do you want the Moro arc to end? Personally, I want Vegeta to win. Well, you can check out my 5 ways the Moro arc could end video, and Haverock and I give 5 potential scenarios that might happen. So if you want to see that, you can check it out. Personally, I agree with you, Grant. I want Vegeta to win so badly. So badly. There's one ending I really don't want to see, and you have to watch the video to check it out. Oh, right. Probably a Kane, because, you know, the original is always best, or in this case, worst. So, probably go with the Kane. Paparacha, hi Masako, did you ever get to Infinity Train? No. I will apologise for that. I am sorry. I will get to it now. Hopefully now I've got a bit more time to check things out. Alright, okay. Let's move on to the next chapter. Chapter 11. Reunion with Raditz. The screen door of Kame House creaked as she pushed it open. Gine stood in the doorway for a moment, holding the door open behind her, hesitating, taking stock. Hang on. Oh, that's right. Something was waiting for her out there, and whatever it was, she wanted to be ready for it. There was Kakarot, standing on the beach a few yards from the front porch, boots planted in the sand, an expression grim. Gine's eyes slid over to glance at the person he was facing, preparing herself for the worst. But once she saw him, her whole body froze, and the screen door slipped from suddenly nerveless fingertips to swing back with a slam. She had wondered from time to time in her more morbid moments what her firstborn child would look like now, had he survived. She imagined him so many different ways. Slighter build like her, sour of expression like Bardock. She had imagined him in a freezer armor, scouter on his face, and a swagger in his step. She had pictured him in orange turtle school gear once or twice. She had even imagined him in some other race's clothing, having secretly survived the explosion, tail hidden and hair cut. She had never thought to wonder if she would recognize him, never entertained the possibility that she wouldn't know her own son, even with an extra 4 feet and 2.5 decades on him. The person standing on the sand outside Kame House, looking bewildered and a little angry, both raised the question and answered it in one heart-freezing moment. She knew him. Of course she knew him. How could she not? And he, if she had never thought to wonder if she would recognize him, she had at least known he would look different than she remembered. But it had never entered her mind to wonder if he might not recognize her. He had been so young the last time they met, and it had been so long since then. There was every possibility that he might not even know her, what she sounded like. But the expression on his face when he caught sight of her, having looked up, startled, at the door slamming shut behind her, told her there hadn't even been a moment's hesitation. He knew her. He knew his mother, just as she knew her son. Raditz, Gine whispered for the first time in 25 years. Mother, Raditz said. Huh? Kakarot demanded, breaking the moment. Gine shook herself and stepped down off the porch, without once taking her eyes off her son, off Raditz. It was a painful joy to have to differentiate between which son she meant, because she had never, not once in her whole life, had both of them in her field of view at the same time. This is... She had to swallow a few times before she could speak. Kakarot, this is your older brother, Raditz. Kakarot's head whipped around to face his mother so fast she was worried for his neck. Then he whipped it round again, nearly as fast, to study the large Saiyan in front of him. It turned out Raditz had grown taller than Kakarot, by a lot, and was much more solidly built. In fact, to put it plainly, he was kind of a tank, and Gine wondered briefly who he had inherited that from. She doubted her own father had been that huge, whoever he was. If he had, surely she wouldn't have been so small and slight herself. But there were other differences between them, much more subtle and dangerous ones, that caught her eye more. Kakarot was staring at his brother openly, which was a rude thing to do here on Earth, but which would not trouble the Saiyan. What would trouble him, what clearly was troubling him, was the total lack of the posturing, flexing, and sizing up that was standard practice for Saiyans who had never met before. Kakarot was just standing there, barely even keeping up a basic guard, as though his strength was so obvious and far above the other that he didn't need to bother. If Kakarot had been a normal Saiyan, playing by normal Saiyan rules, his behavior would be an open insult. And Raditz, who had been young when his planet was destroyed, but hardly young enough to have failed to pick up on his own culture's social cues, was clearly feeling the insult. His fists were clenching, and though it was clear all he wanted to do was stare at his mother in disbelief, his eyes kept darting back to Kakarot, updating his threat assessment on him every few seconds. Gine had to do something before he just hauled off and punched his brother, the only civilized thing to do in response to such behavior. "Raditz," she said, "how are you alive? I thought—"
"How am I alive?" he demanded. "How are you alive? Father told me he was sending Kakarot off-world. He didn't say one word about you."
It was almost aggravating, Gine thought. How could that still sting, even all these years later? "I went with him," she said, as though that weren't obvious. Raditz snarled.
"You went with him," he mocked. "Like it was that easy. Like of course you couldn't leave your child. Like it was your job to babysit instead of trying to defend your homeworld. You were always weak, but I didn't think you were this cowardly."
The old Gine, the one who had been assigned to the kitchens and been grateful, had been used to this kind of talk, even from her own son. The person she had been would have stood there and taken it, because she had no argument to make, and no way back one up if she had. The Gine she was now tapped her foot on the ground, hard enough to create a shockwave that rocked the whole island. Raditz stared at her, and then closed his mouth. "I asked you a question," she said softly. "How did you survive?"
"I was off-world at the time," Raditz answered sullenly. "And I asked you a question. Why did you go with Kakarot? Why?"
Raditz bit back the words, and then shook his head and spat them out anyway.
"Why didn't you come looking for me?"
She trailed off, not sure what to say. His near plaintive tone hurt her heart, and in hindsight, it was a good question. Had she known Raditz was off-world at the time? She couldn't remember. If she'd had even the slightest doubt that Raditz was dead, why hadn't she taken off in her pod once she was away and gone looking for him? Isn't that what a mother would do? Saiyan mothers might not have coddled their young the way humans did, but they did try to protect them until they were capable of doing it themselves. But Raditz had been 8 years old, plenty old enough to take care of himself. Was this question even reasonable to ask? No, she realized, looking up to meet his eyes again. No, it wasn't a reasonable question, because Raditz wasn't thinking reasonably. She studied him again, more closely this time, and found an eloquently tragic story written in the scars on his body. Some of them were battle scars, trophies he had earned and could be proud of, but far more of them had been slowly and deliberately inflicted. He wasn't angry because she hadn't come looking for him, or because she was a coward. He was angry because he had been through hell and back, and the whole time she had not only been alive, but living in paradise. "Raditz, I thought everyone was dead," she said. "I'm so happy you're alive, but I had every reason to think Kakarot and I were the only Saiyans left." He glared at her, but the glare softened as he studied her, doubtless putting together her story as she put together his. A lone Saiyan stuck on a lush, weak planet with nowhere else to go and no reason to go there. Would he not have done what she did? Would he not have stayed and left the rest of the universe to go hang? He wet his lips, perhaps in preparation to speak, but the door to the house creaked open once again, startling the three of them. Krillin and Tenshinhan peeked their heads out, openly curious, but the last thing Gine wanted right now was an audience. "Go back inside," she ordered, her voice, she knew, uncommonly stern. The two of them froze, but a small shape wriggled between their legs and burst out of the porch, running over to Kakarot. Krillin started to run after the child, but Gine waved him away. "It's okay," she said, still maintaining eye contact with Raditz. "This is a family matter." Almost every person on the island was just shocked, in disbelief, in a breath. Gine heard Krillin whispering to someone as he and Tenshinhan quickly backed up and shut the door. And Raditz was now staring at Gohan as Kakarot scooped him up and held him against his shoulder. Gine hid his face in his father's hair, but left one eye exposed to study his uncle. Gine knew she was going to pay for a cryptic comment. It would only raise a million questions, some of which she did not wish to answer. But all that could wait. Every blood relative she had in the universe was here, right in front of her, and she wanted to keep it that way for as long as she could.
When you say family,
Raditz said slowly, still not quite ready to let go of his anger, but unable to hold on to it in the face of such surprising news. He was still staring at Gohan, following his gently waving tail with his eyes. Yep, Kakarot said. Sorry about that. Yep. Kakarot said, patting Gohan affectionately. This is my son, Gohan.
Gohan?
Raditz said, trying out the word. Gine had a smile. It would have been an atrocious name for a Saiyan, Raditz grunted, a mostly neutral noise, but with undertones of approval.
Who spawned him then?
My wife, Chi-Chi, Kakarot explained. He's named after my Grandpa Gohan. He's the human that me and Ma lived with when I was a baby. Say, you should live with us here too.
What? Me? Live here? With you?
Raditz almost sounded amused, helpless in the face of one absurdity after another. Gine smiled, a part of her, a silly part she knew, already imagining which room she would put him in, and which of Ox King's shirts would be small enough for him to borrow. None of Kakarot's clothes would fit, that was for sure. There was something like a smile growing on Raditz's face as well, a small, rusty thing that looked disused and slightly pained. He lifted his hand to his face, perhaps to brush away an errant strand of hair, or put his hand on the back of his neck. But that was a gesture Kakarot would have made, Gine reminded herself, and Raditz was not a man who would have had time for bashfulness. Whatever the gesture might have been, the second his fingers touched the scouter on his ear, the smile faded. He stood there for a long moment, working something out in his mind, and then removed the scouter from his ear. Then, with slow deliberateness, making sure Gine could see what he was doing, he closed his finger over the microphone hole.
We are not the only Saiyans left,
he said, and it was clear that this was not supposed to be good news.
Prince Vegeta and an elite named Nappa also survived. I work for them, and they are the ones who sent me here. We needed more muscle for a job, and I remembered I had a brother tucked away somewhere.
He met Kakarot's eyes meaningfully.
I came here to bring you back to them.
Kakarot shifted uneasily, sensing a fight, but Raditz just chuckled darkly.
It's clear to me you wouldn't survive one day out there in the Freezer Force. You're just as weak as I am, and even more a moron. And you, he added, turning to Gine, you were never even supposed to be here. If I tried to take you back with me, you'd be eaten alive.
So then you'll stay? Kakarot said hopefully. But Gine knew with a sudden, horrible certainty that that was not what Raditz had in mind.
Of course not, idiot, Raditz said to his brother. If I did that, Vegeta would just come here himself, and then we'd all be dead.
But you just can't go back, Gine said desperately. I know the reputation of that family. Prince Vegeta is not going to be pleased if you return empty-handed. You have to stay here. Raditz shook his head sadly.
I'm not going to drag you into this, he said. There's no point in all of us being slaughtered.
You can't just go off to die, Gine protested. Not when I just found out you were alive! The smile Raditz gave her was wicked and a little sad.
Oh, I don't plan on dying. Not for real, anyway. But Vegeta won't bother trying to kill someone he thinks is dead.
He'd always been a tricky little weasel, Gine suddenly remembered. Bardock had been a bit disgusted with him for that, but he had been the type of kid who would pretend to be beaten only to sneak attack his opponent once they turned their back on him. It hadn't won him any friends, but it had won him fights he would have lost in fair combat. If any Saiyan would do something like fake his own death to get out of a fight, it was Raditz. Don't you do anything stupid! Gine scolded him, even as her heart constricted. You survived this long! Don't do anything to mess that up! Raditz scoffed, looking away in disgust.
You don't know what you're talking about, he spat. If I told you half the things I've done to survive, you'd be so disgusted you'd kill me yourself.
He was trying to be flippant, but he looked just wretched. Gine, even though she knew better, even though she knew that to her son, born among Saiyans and then raised in who knows what hellish conditions, any gesture of comfort would be seen as confirmation of his weakness. still couldn't help stepping forward and placing a hand gently on her son's cheeks. His teeth bared at the touch, almost though it hurt, but he didn't pull away or knock her down. She stroked her thumbs over his cheeks, trying to ease the expression of pain she found there, even though she could do nothing to ease the pain itself. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. She could imagine some of what he was alluding to. Even in her brief time in the Scouts, there had been rituals, games played with helpless natives, cruelty that went beyond simple extermination. Even for a Saiyan, Frieza's way of doing things took some deadening of the conscience. "Whatever you've done, it doesn't matter to me. You're alive, and that's all I care about." Perhaps if Raditz had been a different man, he might, just might, have shed tears. I just keep knocking the shot off, saying sorry about that. She could see the ghosts of them in the creases around his eyes, the shakiness of his breath, but he did not weep. Whatever he had been through, he had been beyond weeping, and Gine knew that. Later, she would weep enough tears for the both of them. The Scouter still in his grasp, Raditz pulled her hands down from his cheeks and backed away. Then he replaced the Scouter over his ear, turned, and was about to fly off when he angled his head over his shoulder and fixed Kakarot with a meaningful look. Whatever he was trying to communicate, Kakarot seemed to understand, because he nodded gravely. Raditz nodded back, gave Gine one last sad look, and then leapt into the air and rocketed away. In mere seconds, he was gone from view. Instantly, the screen door slammed open, and the occupants of Kame House spilled out onto the beach, crowding around and demanding answers. Kakarot grimly began explaining, but all Gine could do was just stare up at the sky and try to hold back the tears and hope. Both her children were alive, but they might not be for long. Alright, okay, so there we go. Wow, okay, that was chapter 11, people. Let's take a look. Farah10, thank you very much for the super sticker. Hiya to you too. And Sans Ventura, wow, thank you for the super chat, pal. Let's just say for the sake of the question that Frieza went full PS4 Doc Ock on resurrected all of Goku's old villains and gave the older ones training, tech to compensate for being out of the loop for so long. Who do you have on that team? Well, for sure I would have Cell being there, I would definitely say that. Probably Mercenary Tao, Pilaf even there just for a case of subversion. Probably King Piccolo. Basically, all the ones and all the villains that gave Goku some kind of problem or some kind of, he really feared. Like Mercenary Tao was one, for example. King Piccolo, Cell, and probably Saiyan Saga Vegeta, if he was able to. But yeah, you kind of want to have a good understanding about, who's who, and the ones that would resonate with Goku the most. But thank you so much, Sans, for your contribution. Very much appreciated. Caesar, thank you very much as well. I have a question with series of the Dragon Ball anime is your favourite. DB, DBZ, GT, or Super. Love your content and stay safe with the, that virus we will not speak its name. You know what. Well, I can say, Caesar, that both Philly and I have had it. We had it about maybe 3 weeks ago. We didn't really have much in the case of symptoms, but we're all fully out of the woods now. And I've been pretty much like, working from home for ages. So I've been basically self-isolating already, making content for you guys. So no change there for me then. And Philly's absolutely fine as well. So you don't need to worry about us, but thank you for your concern all the same. But in terms of my favourite series, I would probably have to say, probably original Dragon Ball in a way, because it reminds me of JoJo Part 2. It's got really good lore, just the right amount so it's not complicated. It's got a good adventure and very interesting characters, so I would say that. But then again, GT does have its moments in a way, and Z, it's kind of beyond analysis, it's just there, and it's something I love. But yeah. And Super, they're all good in some way. Super, lacking in some ways, but all in all, I would say Dragon Ball out of the 4, if I had to pick one, is my favourite. Okay. Right. Cool. Again, if you want to ask me a question, stuff like that, super chat, all that kind of stuff, that'd be very much appreciated. Man, I might actually need a drink. So probably after chapter 13, I will go and get a drink. But it'll only be like for about a minute or so. Probably even that. But anyway, chapter 12. Between Hope and a Hard Place. People crowded around Gine and Kakarot on the beach in front of Kame House, their collective voices raised in 1,000 questions. Kakarot was trying to answer them all at once, but his explanations as usual only left them more confused. Gine sought out Grandpa Gohan's comforting wrinkled face, and the noise fell away as it became clear his questions were the only ones she was going to answer. "Who was that just now?" Gohan asked. Gine felt her whole body constrict as she fought the tears that sprang up at the very thought. Kakarot answered for her. "That was my bro," he said proudly. His words caused another burst of noise from the assembled crowd.
"Your what? Was he a Saiyan? Where did he go? What was he doing here?"
"You have a brother?" Krillin said in astonishment. He turned and looked at Gine and she dashed away her tears. This was not the time for sentimentality. "Yes, and he brought news," she said. She looked at Gohan as she spoke. "We are not the only Saiyans left."
"Well, that's great!" Yamcha exclaimed. "How many survivors are there?"
"He only mentioned the 2, Gine said, her blood turning cold as she realized there might be more. Raditz hadn't made it clear. And it's not great. It's terrible. There was a pause, as everyone's tentative smiles began to fade.
"I would have thought you'd be happy more if you survived," Roshi said,
puzzled. Gine shook her head slowly. "Not these 2. Nappa, I think I remember that name right. Raditz said he's an elite, and if he's who I'm thinking of, he's the prince's right-hand man. He'll do anything he says." "A prince?" Bulma said with interest, and Gine gave her a sharp look. "He's no knight in shining armor, Bulma. He and his line were the most vicious, powerful Saiyans of all, which was why they were in charge." "Is he coming here?" Krillin asked, face white. Gine's tail lashed behind her in sharp, jerky motions. "I don't know," she said, beginning to pace. "Raditz was going to fake his own death, but I don't know if that will be enough to draw them away. When the royal family wants something, they get it, and the prince will not be happy about being defied like that." "But what does he want?" Tenshinhan asked, and Gine looked at her son. "Kakarot," she said, and Kakarot regarded her solemnly. He looked more like his father when he wasn't smiling. She hadn't thought of Bardock in years, and she didn't want to be thinking of him now. And me, probably, now that they know I'm here.
"Well, what would they want Kakarot for?" Yamcha scoffed.
"To help them do their dirty work," Gine said, feeling her fists clench of their own accord.
"Well, we can just tell them, no thank you," Krillin said. "And if they get rude, Kakarot can show them the door. Although it does seem like a shame your own brother has to run away from these guys. I'd like to meet him."
Gine stared at Krillin, his little hands on his hips in a cocky stance as he looked up at Kakarot in perfect faith. Somehow she had forgotten that none of them understood how weak she was. Again, her eyes found Gohan's, which was calm. He was waiting for her. "It isn't going to work, Krillin," she said. He only looked puzzled, still secure in his faith in them. Gine breathed in deep and let it out slowly. "I know all of you think I'm strong, but the truth is, I'm the weakest of my kind. If these 2 Saiyans really are coming here, then we don't stand a chance."
"Come on," Yamcha scoffed uneasily. "You're joking, right? You and Kakarot are crazy strong. You even train with Kami. What do these guys have on you?"
It was no use. They all thought too much of her. Gine looked one by one at all the faces around her. Yamcha, Pua, Krillin, Tenshinhan, Chaozu, Launch and Bulma, and Grandpa Gohan, Roshi and Oolong and Turtle. Even Kakarot and little Gohan. They were all looking at her with hope in their eyes, and she couldn't bear it. "Why won't you get it through your thick heads?" she shouted, startling them all. "If those 2 make planet fall, we are dead! And we don't even know if they're coming or not!" "Well, we can ask Kami about that," Kakarot piped up, looking over a little Gohan's head. "He'll know." Gine began to argue, but found she had no argument to make. Why wouldn't Kami be able to tell if 2 aliens across the galaxy had murderous intent towards the Earth? It would hardly be the strangest thing she'd ever seen. "Fine," she said. "We'll go ask him." The truth was, she admitted to herself, as Kakarot handed Gohan to Krillin and they flew away, she was hoping Kami would tell them she was worried over nothing, that Raditz's plan would work, that Nappa and Vegeta had no interest in Kakarot or herself, that they were safe. But when the old Namekian's eyes opened after contemplating the matter for some minutes, she knew that was not what he was going to tell her. "There are two powerful energies headed for Earth as we speak," he said gravely. "At their current speed, I estimate it will take them a year to get here. And they aren't just powerful, they mean the people of Earth great harm. I'm afraid you are right, Gine."
"All right," Kakarot said eagerly. "When do we start training?"
Kami regarded him with a sad smile. "You aren't. I have nothing left to teach you." Gine felt her throat constrict.
"What do you mean?"
"You are both far beyond my power now. I have passed on what wisdom I have, and it is up to you to act on it. There is nothing more I can do for you. I am sorry." Yeah, he really looked it. But despite more arguing from Kakarot, that was the last word on the subject. Gine and Kakarot descended from the lookout in grim silence. At first she thought he'd finally come to understand the threat, but halfway there, he broke the silence to say,
"Well, looks like we gotta train on our own."
And of course, he sounded excited about it. Gine nearly clobbered him right there in mid-air, but she made a heroic effort and refrained. When they arrived back at Kame House and relayed the news, everyone went solemn, but still retained the same optimism as Kakarot. It was infuriating, and after a few half-hearted attempts by Krillin and Bulma to come up with a plan that didn't involve relying on Kakarot and Gine to save the day, she stood and addressed Tenshinhan.
"I believe you've been wanting to have a match with me."
Tenshinhan blinked all three eyes at her, his eagerness warring with his practicality. That is, yes, but this hardly seems like the time." Gine craned her neck to the side, cracking it, then tilted over to the other side.
"On the contrary," she said, "this is the perfect time."
To his credit, Tenshinhan held his ground. "I'm sorry, man, but we have more important things to worry about right now." Gine gave him a plastic smile.
"Trust me, this will only take a second."
Tenshinhan didn't have an ounce of bluster in him, but even he would not allow a jibe like that at his pride to stand. His face darkened, and he stood. The two of them went outside, facing each other on the beach, and Gine could feel Tenshinhan using all his faculties to feel her out. Every single moment, all three eyes scoping her out to ensure a perfect and absolutely solid estimation. He was looking for openings, gaps in her stance, or her attention to exploit. And she dropped her guard entirely, not only to deliberately give him an opening, but also to teach him a lesson about facing opponents who were inferior in skill, but overwhelming in power. To someone like Tenshinhan, used to fighting opponents who had spent years honing their skills under the tutelage of a master, Prince Vegeta would not read like a skillful opponent. That apparent lack of skill would cause him to rush in, as he was doing now, and get a nasty surprise. As Gine was about to give him, at last Gine's surprise wouldn't cost him his life. Tenshinhan blew past the place where Gine's defenses should have been, his fingers extended and aiming at chakra points. He jabbed her solar plexus, throat, and forehead several times in quick succession, then danced behind her and elbowed her in the small of her back, all to no avail. She stood, not yielding even an inch, arms lightly folded across her stomach, as though she were waiting in line at the grocery store. When he appeared in front of her, breathing hard with exertion, his eyes were wide in astonishment. My attacks did nothing?" She regarded him calmly.
"Would you like to try again?"
He growled and dashed forward, even faster this time, hitting joints and soft spots, pelting her with blows that she had every ounce of strength in him, with exactly the same result. Gine smoothed the front of her dress where some of the hits had wrinkled the fabric, and then glanced up at him, sighing. He was starting to understand. Now, to drive the point home. With a growl that began deep in her chest, Gine called on the reserves of energy swirling in her core, pulling them up and amplifying them. Like a geyser, the power rose in time with her increasing yell, shooting up and out until the wind was blowing at hurricane speeds around her. The ground shook, and the laconic ocean waves grew erratic and agitated. Tenshinhan was driven to his knees, one arm thrown over his eyes as sand whipped everywhere. When her power had reached its full height, Gine let it drop, everything falling to eerie silence, after the furious noise of wind and water and earth being whipped into an unnatural frenzy ended. Tenshinhan wasted no time being overawed, and as soon as the pressure of her energy let up, he burst to his feet, ready to resume his attack. He lunged at her again, fists clenched and aimed to kill. At least he understood that much. But with one hand, she just simply, and without really much forethought actually, just grabbed his fist and twisted it 180 degrees, taking him along with it. He slammed into the sand on his back, gasping painfully as the wind was knocked out of him. She stood over him, balancing her foot lightly but insistently on his neck. After a moment, Tenshinhan lay back in the sand, defeated. "When I came here, I was the weakest Saiyan that had ever lived," she told him, knowing that everyone else had crept out onto the porch and was listening. "Even now, my power would make me a solid low-class Saiyan, good for nothing more than routine dirty work. The Saiyans coming here are 10 times more powerful than this. Do I make myself clear?" She removed her foot, ready to help Tenshinhan up. But she had not made herself clear, it seemed, because as soon as she extended her hand, he grabbed it, obviously intending to pull her off balance and continue the fight. Faster than Tenshinhan could probably see, she twisted in midair and brought her elbow down on his stomach. His eyes rolled back into his head and his mouth gaped wide, spittle flying as he wheezed a painful breath. Launch flung herself over the porch and slung to a stop next to him, cradling his head and calling his name, but he was already unconscious.
You didn't have to go that far!"
She shouted up to Gine, who was brushing sand from her dress. "The Saiyans coming here are 10 times more powerful than me," she repeated, her voice calm but her mind in turmoil. She wanted to make them understand, but what favor was she really doing them? Knowing what was coming, instead of it being surprise, was that kindness? But they are 1,000,000 times more cruel. Saiyans have no concept of honor or mercy. Her voice broke, but she forced herself to go on. They slaughtered entire worlds for profit and for fun. Every Saiyan I knew had the blood of billions of beings on their hands, and they were proud of it. That is what's coming here. That is what we have to face. Now do you understand?" No one answered her. She couldn't stand to look at them, all shuffling in place and silent. So when Kakarot spoke, it came as a surprise. He looked confused, hurt even. "You said Saiyans were warriors." His tone was accusatory, pleading, asking her to take it back, deny it, let the world be as it had been before. She had never told him, she realized. Grandpa Gohan had known, but somehow it never come up around Kakarot. She had never told him about her people, and he rarely asked. But somehow she had expected that one basic truth, that Saiyans were bloodthirsty brutes to be transmitted anyway. But it hadn't. "Warriors, yes," she said, "but not good, not kind, not a single one of them." His harrowed expression was a weight on her heart. She hadn't meant to deceive him. She just didn't want to remember. Tenshinhan groaned at her feet, and she stepped away from him, glad to have somewhere else to look. Before she could do anything else, however, she heard Kami's voice speaking in her head.
"Greetings! Can you hear me?"
The shocked reaction of the crowd on the beach told Gine she wasn't the only one being spoken to. Aloud, she answered, "Yes, we hear you, Kami. What is it?"
"I've been speaking with my superiors, and I believe I may have a way to help you after all."
"God, his superiors?" Gine had Bulma mutter in amazement. Kami went on.
"There is a martial arts master in Otherworld who is familiar with Saiyans and the threat that they pose. He has agreed to give special dispensation for one mortal to train with him."
Gine's mind raced, hope blooming in her chest for the first time since Raditz had given them the news. She heard Roshi saying,
"Who is this master? Is he someone we know?"
"No," Kami answered.
"He is the Lord of Worlds, known as King Kai, and he has agreed to help us face this threat. Whichever person you choose to receive the training will need to come to me, and quickly. We do not have much time, and the way to King Kai is long and arduous. The Lord of the Dead has agreed to allow a living mortal to pass into his realm, but he is not patient, and he may overturn his decision if he is kept waiting."
"The Lord of the Dead?" Bulma cried in horror.
So whoever does the training's gotta die?
Oolong squealed. He said a living mortal, dumbass, Launch snapped. Which one of us should it be? Kakarot asked, and everyone turned to him, dumbfounded. I think that much is obvious, Tenshinhan croaked, getting laboriously to his feet. He waved off Launch's attentions and stood gingerly. You're the one to go, Kakarot. Me? Kakarot said dumbly. What about you, Ma? Don't you want to go? He turned to her, his earlier dismay seemingly forgotten. She smiled despite everything and shook her head. I don't. It really should be you, son. His frown didn't lift. I wanted to train with you, he said forlornly. Gine cupped her son's cheek in one hand, memorizing his face as she realized she wouldn't be seeing it again for a whole year. You need to be ready to protect your home, Kakarot, she said. Besides, I'll be training the others while you're gone. The fighters in the group blossomed at this, their hope rising higher than Gine's. She was less certain of their doom than she had been a minute ago, but the thought of coming face to face with the prince left her cold with dread. Kakarot was still hesitating, and she pushed him gently away. Go, she said. He took a long look at her, slowly handed her little Gohan, and then hugged her, swiftly but tightly. Then he was gone, and the beach, though still crowded, felt empty. Alrighty, okay, so that is chapter 12, and let's see what we got in terms of super chats right now. David James, shout out to Molly Shadows for showing me this. Oh, cool. Well, shout out to Molly, and shout out to David for watching it as well. Alright, what else have we got? We have got Heartless Fang saying, what if of yours do you think would benefit most from novelization like this one? I think What If Bulma Trained Like Goku could be a good one, mainly for the fact that it has a lot more nuance than a lot of my What Ifs have. What If Frieza Turned Good would be good as well. Okay. Logan R says, Ohio, Masako. I was wondering if you'd be keen to the idea of a new What If series, one that's more akin to anime in general. JoJo could be a start. Oh, okay. So you're talking about like doing a JoJo one? Well, I would do one, but in reality, I really don't know much about JoJo to really justify it. I always like to have a good amount of knowledge if I was going to consider doing What Ifs in a way. So, yeah. Yeah, let's just take a look at the chats. And Farrah, oh, thank you very much for the super sticker. Oh, that's really appreciated. Red Dragon Force got some good ideas for next round table. Oh boy. Oh boy. That Red Dragon's got some ideas, so I'm expecting good things to come from this boy. Alright. Asbecti game about the hyperbolic time chamber. Right now, it's not known right then. And also for the fact that with Goku, he almost succumbed to it when he was a kid. So I don't think Gine would want him to have to go through it again anytime soon. Frost says, I'm still planning how Piccolo Jr. be in the Gine story. Oh, okay, so you're planning a way to bring him in. So your own alternative take. Okay, that's fair enough. But yeah, as you know, Piccolo Jr. isn't in the story because, yeah, King Piccolo was utterly decimated. Alright. Chapter 13. Convincing Chi-Chi. Well, this is going to be a comedy. No! Chi-Chi shouted, unfolding a bedsheet with a snap so hard the sheet tore in half. In her rage, she didn't notice and tucked it on the bed anyway. Absolutely not! Bad enough I'm expected to put up 4 layabouts on top of all the other work I do around here, but now you want to take Gohan away and turn me into a meathead like his father? Him into a meathead, sorry. Gine followed her daughter-in-law helplessly around the brand new capsule house as she prepared it to receive guests, making beds and airing out rooms, setting electronics, and engaging the temporary foundations. Thank the gods Bulma handed out capsules like candy. If Chi-Chi had been asked to accommodate 4 fighters in her own house, she might have imploded. I don't want to take him away, Gine said calmly as Chi-Chi fluffed a pillow and scattered feathers around the room. I want you to come with us. Chi-Chi threw a comforter over the bed, moving on to the next one before it had even landed. As Gine watched it settle into place seemingly on its own, corners draping themselves elegantly as they fell. And do what? Chi-Chi demanded, as she made hospital corners on the next bed. Do laundry in the river whilst the rest of you teach Gohan how to be a delinquent? Gine sighed. She knew perfectly well Chi-Chi was angry Kakarot had left without saying goodbye, scared the Earth might be destroyed, and worried for her son. This was simply how she coped, trying to control what little she could and ignoring the rest. Often it worked. She managed Kakarot a lot better than Gine ever had, but this time she wished the girl would just be reasonable. Chi-Chi, I'm asking you to come with him so he can keep studying. It was enough to halt Chi-Chi's mad rush around the house for a second or two, but only that. He can study here. He doesn't need to go out in the woods and learn how to punch people. Chi-Chi, you were a martial artist, Gine pointed out, exasperated. You punched people all the time. I was, Chi-Chi said, pulling out another storage capsule and unpopping it. Inside were several trunks full of old quilts and sheets, as well as baby clothes and knickknacks, which she sorted through impatiently. But I don't want Gohan to grow up like his father. You did your best with him, but Gohan has potential, and I won't see it wasted. This line of attack was just going nowhere. Gine had to try another thing. She hadn't planned on bringing it up until the issue of Gohan was settled, but it seemed that was not to be. Didn't you like being a martial artist? She asked. She was pretty sure she knew the answer, but if she was wrong, she might have to do something drastic. Just adjust the camera there. It's a bit shaky, but there we go. Yes, of course, Chi-Chi snapped, without looking up from the box of trinkets she was sorting through. But then her words caught up with her and she stopped. Her eyes went distant, and she rubbed the object in her hands thoughtfully. Gine craned her head and knew that it was the envelope as she held the prize money from the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament. She smiled. She was right. Chi-Chi came to herself and glared. What's that got to do with anything? She stuffed the envelope back into the album she had taken it from and recapitalized everything, minus the bedclothes, which she began unfolding. Gine took up a sheet and worked on one of the other beds. Well, why did you stop? She asked, tugging at the corners until they were straight. What was the point? Training takes up too much time. Just seeming to go on studies is a full-time job. And then there's cooking and cleaning for everyone, and keeping Kakarot in line is... Well, you know how it is. Gine knew how that was. But what if you did have time? She pressed. What if you didn't have to worry about all that? Would you want to keep training? Chi-Chi gave an exasperated sigh. Of course I liked sparring with Kakarot back when we were kids. But we're not kids anymore. And I'm not going to let Gohan grow up thinking he can solve his problems with violence. Gine dropped the pillow she was trying to stuff into its pillowcase and fixed her daughter-in-law with a stern look. Some problems can only be solved with violence, she said firmly, and this is one of them. And I'm doing my part, Chi-Chi retorted. You see me putting up accommodations for Kakarot's delinquent friends without a word of complaint, because I know they need some place to train. But I don't see why you want to drag Gohan into all of this. He's going to get dragged into it whether we want it or not. Gine saw Chi-Chi bite her lip as she bent over to smooth some wrinkles on the bed. Those two Saiyans are going to be very curious about a species that can interbreed with Saiyans. I've certainly never heard of such a thing before. And they're going to want to know how strong he is. If we can't stop them, they're going to come after them. If you can't stop them, then what chances do we have anyway? Chi-Chi wailed, throwing up her hands. He's 4! When I was 4 and my mother kicked me out of the house, Gine returned Chi-Chi's horrified look with a wry smile. Don't look like that. We didn't like each other, and I was perfectly capable of fending for myself. I'd have left soon anyway if she hadn't forced the issue. Well, that's all fine and good for you, Saiyans, Chi-Chi huffed, turning back to her task. But Gohan's human, and it's not normal for a 4-year-old human to be doing anything but staying at home with his mother. Gohan's not human, Gine said. Not entirely. He has potential, Chi-Chi. You can see it in his mind. But I can see it in his body. He's strong. I know he is. And he's clever. Those two things together will make him a force to be reckoned with. At the mention of training Gohan again, Chi-Chi grunted in annoyance and left the room, moving to the bathroom to stock it with linens and toiletries. Gine followed slowly at her wit's end with this girl who called her Ma. Her own mother had been cold and perpetually disappointed, and Gine had never known Chi-Chi as a child, so sometimes she found herself totally unable to figure out how she was supposed to relate to her. She was a daughter, but not her child. She was a friend, but also family. And sometimes, every so often, her stubbornness would become an impenetrable wall. As a Saiyan, Gine's natural reaction to a wall she needed to get past was to smash it. As an Earthling, she needed to try something different. Chi-Chi. dear, she said softly, leaning a hand on a doorway as Chi-Chi slammed bottles into baskets and baskets into cupboards. I want you and Gohan there with us. I don't want to be without my family for a whole year. Chi-Chi stopped, leaning a pink plastic bucket full of shampoo and conditioner bottles against the edge of the sink and staring at herself in the mirror. They're a bunch of boorish louts with no manners or sense, and I don't want them teaching Gohan to be like them, she said, but she was no longer shouting. Gine gave her another gentle push. You'll be teaching him, dear. Gine hid a smile as Chi-Chi whipped her head around. And I'll be teaching you. I want both of you to train with us. You have potential too, you know. I can't train with... I'm too far behind. Chi-Chi looked away from her own reflection and down at herself, tugging at the sash around her waist pensively. Gina let her think. Chi-Chi worried her lower lip between her teeth for a long time. I'm too far behind, she said again, and Gina knew she had won. I don't know who you think you're talking to, she said brightly, taking the baskets of shampoo from her daughter's hands, but I know a thing or two about being behind. That won't be a problem. And I don't know what you're thinking, stocking this much shampoo for 3 baldies. Gine showed Chi-Chi's mouth the names Tenshinhan, Chaozu, and Krillin, and then laughed. Yamcha has enough hair for all of them, she said, taking the basket back, and these are nearly expired. They need to be used up. Humming, Chi-Chi stocked the rest of the bathroom quickly, but without the violence and emotion of just moments ago. And when she was done, she breezed past Gine and stood in the living room, surveying her work with a pleased air. Well, that's that. When did you say they were coming again? They should be here in a few hours, Gine said, glancing at a wall clock. Chi-Chi's hands flew to her face. Goodness gracious, I thought I had more time. I need to get lunch started and check on Gohan's math assignment, and Grant said he's running low on ointment. Gine put her arm around Chi-Chi's shoulders and led her to the door, smiling. Let me help you. All right. Okay, we are at chapter 14, people. All right, let's check out Sans Ventura. If and when Goku bites the dust one day, how would you have him go out? One final battle with Vegeta, in combat saving the world, or just old age? Well, I do like what they say about Goku and Vegeta going off planet to have one last battle before their prime is taken away from them. I think that's actually a perfect way for them to end, so honestly, I'd just do that. And Paparacha, which what if would you spin off if not R&R from Raditz? Probably Bulma train like Goku, or Raditz. No, not Raditz, that's R&R. Cell. That would be a lot of fun. Especially with the kids of Cell and all that kind of, and Good Boy 21. But yeah, don't worry guys, I will be back shortly, just give me a minute or two, and I'll be back with some water, but we will be back for the rest of the chapters. Don't go away. Alright, okay, I'm back, people. Don't worry, it wasn't for very long. It was, like I said, it was like a minute, 2 minutes tops, but it wasn't even 2 minutes. If you're wondering where I'm coming from, I'm carrying that, and yeah, I've turned into a jug. I am a transforming shapeshifter, I've turned into a jug. So yeah, I thought I would be able to cope with the what if on my own. That is until dehydration showed up. Yeah, see what I did there? Okay, yeah, I just feel I need to adjust the camera slightly. And my tripod is getting a little bit jittery. So, just need to just adjust it slightly. Yeah. Here at the MasakoX channel, we have the utmost professionalism. Okay, cool. Alright, let's see. Alright, Sans Ventura asks, what would be your idea for the final villain in Dragon Ball? The last big threat to the multiverse? honestly, let's make sure I'm in focus. Well, you hear my answer. Oh god. Probably Zalama, the god of creation who made the Super Dragon Balls. That'd be a really cool thing to do. Or Yamoshi, the original Super Saiyan god. That'd be neat too. Alright, let's just check, the jug's back. KG's just saying, yep, the jug's back. Suddenly close up. Yeah, we don't do things by halves here. I was a fool. I was a fool. I did not hydrate myself. And Keith Harmon says, the first time in a live chat with you. Really excited to be able to chat with you finally. Oh, cool, Keith. Glad you're having a good time. Okay. Infinity Wolf. Hey, Masako, do you think Orange could have existed in an alternative version of the Gine What If? Will the What If Gine come back after the novel live streams? Yes, I do. I have it on my very calendar. The day before the April Fool's What If, on March 31st, is when part 15 of Gine will come out. So don't worry, I've got something planned. But I feel we're pretty much nearly on the home stretch of the Gine story. Because I feel like there's not that much left. Because I really feel like I don't want to keep repeating the same thing over and over. So, maybe 3 more parts after this one. We'll see. Yeah, it's good to end it on a good note. But don't worry, we're not ending it right now. So, don't worry about that. But yeah, if you can keep the chats coming, do keep them coming if you can. Let's get on with chapter 14. Now that I am slightly more hydrated. Chapter 14. Training and techniques. Actually, I'm just going to rotate it a little bit. There we go. We need to get Chi-Chi flying, Yamcha said during the midday break. He, Gine, Tenshinhan, Chillin, and Krillin, that's Chaozu and Krillin's fusion, were sitting on the lush grass at the edge of a meadow a few mountains over from Mount Paozu, where they had set up camp. The 5 of them were ranged in a semicircle under tree cover, cooling off after a morning of exertion. Chi-Chi was nearby, drilling Gohan in science terms with flashcards while the boy ate lunch. Yamcha was right, of course, but Gine didn't know why he was bringing it up now. They were all painfully aware that Chi-Chi was the only one who hadn't mastered Bukujutsu. Chi-Chi, most of all. We've all tried explaining it to her, Tenshinhan said, echoing Gine's thoughts. All we can do now is hope she figures it out on her own. That's what I'm getting at, Yamcha countered. We haven't all tried. He looked directly at Gine. You've been flying around since you were a kid. How come you never gave her any advice? Gine stared back at him, nonplussed. My mother threw me off a cliff when I was 3, she said. I have no advice to give. They stared at her in horror. Krillin was the first to break the awkward silence by clearing his throat. Okay, but, you must have taught Kakarot how to fly. You didn't throw him off a cliff, did you? He added, gulping. Gine chuckled dirtily, dryly. I never taught Kakarot how to fly, she said, watching Gohan triumphantly shout an answer and accidentally spray Chi-Chi with crumbs. He picked it up on his own, like most Saiyan children. There was another, longer, awkward silence. Not for the first time. Gine wished Grandpa Gohan had agreed to train with them. She had asked him to, the night before their training officially started, but he had only looked thoughtfully at the fighters assembled in the yard and told her there was nothing he could teach them that they couldn't teach each other. Gine still wasn't sure what she could offer anyone other than a challenging sparring partner, but Tenshinhan and Chaozu had been able to teach the Kame school students how to fly, and they in turn had shown Chi-Chi that farm chores could also be training. Chi-Chi had been ecstatic, and Mount Paozu was now the proud owner of a very productive field of radishes, with fields of carrots and spring onions well on their way. Do you see the reference there? Megane-chan, if you're watching this, I dig it. I dig that. Radishes, carrots, spring onions. You're on the ball there. Chi-Chi switched to maths, and Gine asked the others in a whisper, What is the quadratic equation anyway? Tenshinhan, Chaozu, and Yamcha all shrugged in unison, but Krillin straightened up and began to recite, A squared plus B squared equals C squared! Ha-ha! He said proudly. His audience oohed appreciatively. How do you know that? Gine asked in awe. Master Roshi always said we should train our minds as well as our bodies, he said. So, what is it for? She asked, and his proud grin faltered. Stop changing the subject, he said, frowning at her. We need to get Chi-Chi up to speed, or she might decide this is a waste of time and take Gohan home with her. That wasn't likely, in Gine's mind at least, but Chi-Chi's lack of progress was a problem. The girl, as demure and sweet as she liked to appear, was a brawler born and bred. Using Ki to add strength and fortitude to her own body came as natural as breathing. But focusing the raw destructive power of Ki energy in her palm, or using it to fly, was seemingly beyond her. In 6 months, she hadn't been able to do more than just heat up her hands, even though her speed and strength were increasing day by day. Gine didn't think she would actually pick up and leave if she didn't get it soon, but she might give up on Ki control as not worth her time. When Chi-Chi got frustrated, she tended to blame anything but herself. The problem is she tries too hard, Yamcha mused out loud. And thinks too much, Tenshinhan agreed. But how do we get her to stop thinking? Chaozu wondered. They pondered the question in silence for the rest of the break, but made no headway. As they performed their pre-training stretches, Yamcha mused out loud again. Hey Chi-Chi, whatever happened to that helmet you used to have? Chi-Chi straightened out a deep lunge to stare at him. What helmet? Yamcha looked up from a hurdler's stretch in surprise. You know, that helmet with the blade on top you used to wear? You had it on when we first met and stuff? Chi-Chi gasped, then put her hands on her hips and regarded him sternly. Yamcha, I'm surprised at you, she exclaimed. And with you with a girlfriend, no less. Yamcha looked bewildered. What are you talking about? Chi-Chi tisked him and shook her head. I knew you had feelings for me back then, but I couldn't return them, and I thought we both moved on. Yamcha shrunk under the sudden scrutiny of 5 sets of eyes. What? I didn't. I wasn't. I was just wondering what you did with it, that's all. Jeez. He leaned over his other leg, cheeks flaming. Well, if that's all it is, Chi-Chi said primly, resuming her lunges. I put it away as soon as I got engaged to Kakarot. It was too childish for a young lady about to be married. I wouldn't call taking out a dinosaur in one go childish, Yamcha muttered. Krillin heard and turned to Chi-Chi with raised eyebrows. You took it out a dinosaur with your helmet? What did you do? Headbutt it? I did no such thing, Chi-Chi exclaimed. The blade came off like this. She put her arms over her head, palms together. Between her hands, energy began to glow in the shape of a scythe, unbeknownst to her and to the breathless anticipation of everyone else. Closing her eyes, she flung the energy scythe forward, sending it whistling through the air straight at Yamcha. He barely managed to fling himself out of the way in time, a sizable chunk of his hair being not so lucky. The blade arced around in a long curve, mowing down several trees before returning to Chi-Chi's head. Gohan's eyes were wide. Wow, Mom! That was amazing! Chi-Chi opened her eyes, blushing, and the energy dissipated. There's nothing amazing about playing pretend, Gohan. Now finish your stretches, young man. You don't want to cramp up. Chi-Chi! Krillin spluttered. Do you know what you just did? You mean besides making a fool of myself reminiscing? Chi-Chi snapped. You just performed an energy attack, Tenshinhan informed her. A powerful one. What are you talking about? Chi-Chi demanded. But then she caught sight of Yamcha, who was pulling at his ruined ponytail in dismay, and the massacred trees behind him. Her eyes went wide. What? Was that me? She looked down at her hands in amazement, and then back up at the carnage she had wrought. Slowly, she put her palms together over her head again, but no energy appeared between them, and she scowled. Gine smiled. The girl would get it soon enough. She wasn't Kakarot's wife for nothing, after all. Alright, okay, that was chapter 14, guys. Ayo, hydration check. Alright. In terms, back to Infinity Wolf, what you said about a ranch existing in an alternative timeline. I did consider it when I was writing part 10 about Launch and Ranch getting together. But this time around in the Gine story, I wanted to make it a bit more like casual, kind of like, yeah, more of like casual fling and stuff like that. So I don't think Ranch would be working in this one. I know how badly you guys want to see Ranch meet Gine. I know it. I will make it happen someday. Just not right now, because otherwise, you know, it'd be a bit forced. You need to wait for the right time for that, is all. Red Dragon is a dramatic haircut. I know, right? That's going to take a lot of explaining at the barbers. Alright, okay. Alright, Chapter 15. Gine and Gohan, Part 2. Gine's boots shushed softly against the leaf litter of the forest floor, little Gohan clambering more noisily behind her. He struggled over a fallen tree, fell, and ran to catch up, clutching for her hand, and then settling for the hem of her dress when she did not lower it for him. Gine had told Chi-Chi they were going for a walk, but what the girl didn't know couldn't hurt her. It was time for Gohan's first hunt. A pure-blooded Saiyan child his age would have already been playing pounce games with his parents' tails for years, and probably have managed to catch a few lizards. But despite the tail waving behind him, Gohan didn't seem to have an ounce of killer instinct in his body.
"Wow, Grandma, look!"
Gohan exclaimed, tugging at her dress and pointing.
"A Metastroboides! They're rare in this area. And there's a Chrysolophus pictus roosting in it. Oh, look! A Physegnus cocynicus! It just wasn't behind that bush. Did you see it?"
Put simply, Gine thought. As she stared at the bird in a tree and listened to the lizard scuttling into cover, the boy was an incorrigible egghead. He was strong and growing stronger every day. Absolutely every day. He knew every kata of both the Turtle School and the Crane School by heart. He had learned how to fly in a day, and was able to meditate like someone 3 times his age. But if Bardock had been ashamed of Raditz of being wily, she didn't know what he'd make of his grandson. "Gohan," she said, kneeling down to look him in the eye, "do you know why we're out here?" Gohan blinked.
Nature walk?"
he ventured. Gine shook her head. "We're here to hunt," she told him. His sweet little face went serious as he thought about this.
"You mean me, don't you?"
he said, tucking his chin onto his chest. At least those brains worked both ways. Bulma was smart too, but she could be oblivious when it comes to matters of common sense. Gine nodded. "I'll show you the basics, but then it'll be up to you. You ready?" She stood, but Gohan tucked at her dress again.
"Not an endangered species,"
he said firmly, and she smiled. After a few brief lessons in stalking, wind direction and camouflage, Gine dropped behind Gohan and let him lead the way. She could already tell there was a herd of deer up at the mountain to the east. But if Gohan couldn't even find his prey, then there was no point in teaching him how to kill it. Sure enough, he walked in the opposite direction of the deer, and Gine reminded herself that failure was as good a teacher as success. To her surprise, though, in just a few minutes, they were crouched at the edge of a slight clearing, where an enormous tree had spread its branches, a flock of small birds roosting in its roots.
"Arborophila rufigularis,"
Gohan whispered. Gine nodded. The clearing would make it difficult to get very close, but these birds tended to run rather than fly. All in all, not bad for a first attempt. She watched as Gohan closed his eyes, and felt as he settled his energy to be as inconspicuous as possible. Probably not necessarily with foul, but it couldn't hurt. Opening his eyes, he crept around the edge of the clearing until he was hidden in a vast fern. From her vantage point, Gine could barely see him, and the birds remained unconcerned. Without warning, a rock sailed out of the fern into the middle of the flock, its angle making it seem to the birds as though it had come from another direction, and they ran from it, straight into Gohan's hiding place. After a confusion of feathers and squawking, Gohan leaped out of the fern with a triumphant yell, the neck of a struggling bird held tightly in his hand.
"I got one, Grandpa! I got one!"
She stood slowly in amazement. Gohan ran to her, grinning, and thrust the bird forward to show her.
"Did you see? I caught it! Did you see me?"
"That was incredible, Gohan," Gine said, beginning to grin herself. Even Kakarot hadn't got a kill on his first try. Brains guiding brawn was a force to be reckoned with indeed. Maybe she'd been worried over nothing. "Here," Gohan said, holding the bird out for her to take, and Gine's smile slid off her face. She did not move. Gohan held it out a few inches further.
"For you,"
he said. "What am I supposed to do with it?" she said, and the smile slid off his face as well. He looked at the still struggling bird, and then back at her, holding it out again.
"I got it," he said. "I did it."
"You're not finished." The boy gaped at her, his mind refusing to comprehend what she wanted.
"But, you mean I should carry it home?"
He looked at her hopefully, and she shook her head. "Not like that, you shouldn't." Gohan looked down at the bird once more, then up at her, and Gine made 2 fists in the air, twisting them sharply in opposite directions. Instantly, Gohan's face went white, and he must have loosened his grip, because the bird gave a loud whistle and flapped its wings until it was free, running away as fast as its little legs could carry it. Neither Gohan nor Gine watched it go. Gohan was still at his grandmother. Gohan was staring at his grandmother, his lower lip trembling.
I don't wanna,
he hiccuped, and Gine looked at his sweet, miserable little face, and wondered what else she'd been expecting. Okay, she said simply, and turned around, heading back down the mountain towards camp. Gohan clambered after her, and this time, when he reached for her hand, she let him take it. For the rest of the day, Gine thought long and hard about Kakarot's early hunting experiences, games he delighted to master, and her own, matters of survival, but found nothing to guide her on how to help her grandson overcome this hurdle, or even if she should. But that evening, she caught Gohan looking thoughtfully at the roast duck Yamcha had bagged by accident while practicing his spirit ball technique. She watched him look from Yamcha, who was joking with Krillin, to Chi-Chi, who had plucked and dressed it, and then down at its plate more than once before the meal was through, and she thought maybe she could let him decide. Early the next day, Gohan grabbed Gine's hand and led her into the forest, not letting go until they'd been walking for nearly half an hour. He dropped into a crouch and in a few seconds was out of sight. Gine was pretty sure he was stalking a rabbit, much quicker and more alert prey than roosting birds, so she was unsurprised when he re-emerged a few minutes later frustrated and empty-handed. He led her through the forest for a few more minutes before spotting something else, only to return with nothing to show for it once more. After a few rounds of this, he finally bagged another bird, a large flightless thing he didn't tell her the scientific name of. It struggled and squawked, but he gripped it tightly, asking her a question with his eyes. "Hold it here and here," she told him, and he did. "Twist like this as hard as you can, as fast as you can. You don't want it to suffer." He nodded, took a few quick breaths, then squeezed his eyes shut and wrung his hands. There was a snap, and the bird fell limp. "Very good," Gine murmured, and Gohan opened his eyes, looking down at the bird in his hands like he expected it to scold him. When it did nothing but hang there, he blinked a few times, and then looked up at Gine. He seemed almost surprised. The most important thing, to Gine at least, was that he didn't cry. "A good kill," she said. "Your mother will make it into a tasty dish." "Yeah," Gohan agreed thoughtfully, and together they descended the mountain. When they were nearly in sight of the camp, Gohan turned to her and held out the dead bird. "You take it," he said. "I don't think Mom would like it if she knew I killed it." Gine hesitated. The boy was probably right. Chi-Chi would faint dead anyway if she knew her baby boy had been out wringing the necks of the local wildlife. It was just, she thought, taking the bird, that a Saiyan's first kill ought to be celebrated. It was the first tangible sign that you were worth something, that you weren't just an empty mouth but a member of society, a person. It was an occasion for boasting, for dancing, and teasing from adults who just the day before had treated you as though you didn't exist. A Saiyan's first kill was a good thing. This was all true, and so Gine didn't know, as she watched Gohan go up to his mother and hug her, why she felt like crying. Oh, okay. A little bit of a drink. Joseph Brenner, thank you very much for your super chat. All right. All right, so Sans Ventura asks again, Okay, so can you guys hear me now? This should fix it. This should fix it now. This should work now. Oh, is it fixed? Oh, thank God. Oh, thank God. Okay. Alright, cool. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. I'm so sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. Like, I really have no idea. It just suddenly cut out. Alright. Well, don't worry. We will read that chapter again. So, you guys aren't going to miss out. It is my civic duty as one of them YouTubers. So here we go. We'll go and do that again. Chapter 16. Unexpected Arrivals in Bagging Area.
What's that?
Gohan asked, pointing at the sky. For a heart-stopping moment, Gine thought that maybe the Saiyans had come early. Way early. And they were all about to die. But then she looked up and saw what was definitely not a Saiyan descending from the sky.
Who is that?
Chi-Chi asked, shading her eyes. I don't know, Yamcha said, frowning. The figure landed lightly on his toes in front of them. Gine blinked in astonishment.
A Namekian?
She said under her breath. The newcomer smiled in response. Not just a Namekian, he said. Don't you recognize me, Gine? She only knew 2 Namekians, and one of them wasn't exactly walking around. But the being standing in the swaying wildflowers of the training field was young and strong and straight-backed. Still, if you added a bunch of wrinkles on a stoop...
Kami?
Gine took a step forward, hoping for a clearer look, and maybe a hug, but to her surprise, someone brushed past her and reached the Namekian first. It was Chi-Chi. Eyes blazing, she marched up to him and jabbed a finger in his face. Even though he was so tall, she had to reach it to get there. You're the reason my Kakarot's gone, she bellowed. Bring him back right now! How dare you show your face red here without bringing him with you! Chi-Chi, Yamcha hissed. He ran forward and attempted to drag her away, succeeded only in digging his feet into the ground. That's Kami! Show some respect! Did he show my marriage respect? Chi-Chi shoved Yamcha away, sending him sprawling, not once taking her eyes off Kami. Did he show me respect when he took my husband after who knows where, without even consulting me? Who do you think you are? The Guardian of Earth blinked, apparently at a loss. Gine started a laugh. Chi-Chi, dear, give him a break. He's probably never been scolded before in his life. With a pointed, Chi-Chi spun on her heel and walked away with her nose in the air. Come on, Gohan, she said, leading her son away. Gohan looked back at Gine and gave her a wink, which he returned with a grin. Yamcha stood, brushing himself off, and muttering, Can't believe, don't know why, Kakarot. Gine went up to the Namekian, searching his face in amazement. Are you really Kami? She asked. He nodded, smiling. How did you... Is this... normal? Kami chuckled and shook his head. I used the Dragon Balls to wish myself young again. That's a heck of a beauty routine, Krillin said faintly, staring up in awe at the Guardian, who smiled deeper. I thought you could use some help in the upcoming fight, and I wouldn't have been much use otherwise. There was a slightly bitter undertone to his words that no one else noticed, and which Gine wasn't sure she hadn't just imagined. But she watched him a little more carefully from then on, as he settled into their routine and helped them train. Even Chi-Chi eventually came around and let him teach her, though she remained cool to him otherwise. They all improved much faster under his instruction, and for the first time in months, Gine began to feel real hope. Still, there was that sense of something unspoken that continued to linger, but it wasn't until she saw him with Gohan one day that she broached the topic. Her grandson was picking flowers, ostensibly for some nature notebook that Chi-Chi was having him keep, but probably just because, and he shyly offered one to Kami, who was meditating nearby. Kami smiled, grinned really, and accepted the flower, tucking it behind his ear. He looked so carefree, in a way that a deity really shouldn't, and it gave Gine the courage to ask him, What are you really doing here? He glanced up at her,
the grin fading but still present. Gine put her hand on Gohan's head as he retreated behind her leg, though he continued to watch the Namekian with wide, curious eyes. "I'm here to help you fight," Kami said, like he knew that wasn't the end of it. "But why?" Gine pressed. "Why do that now? Why not with Piccolo? Or if you couldn't fight him yourself, why not do more to help us then? What's different about this threat?" Kami studied her for a long time. "You know, when we first met," he said eventually, "you were just taking care of one of my greatest mistakes. There you were, with the very god granting you a request, and all you and Kakarot wanted was to protect the Earth that I had put in danger." His smile, which hadn't really gone away, turned sardonic. "I hope you'll understand when I tell you that was quite a blow to my pride. Where had I gone wrong, that two mortals, not even from this world, felt they had to pick up my slack? When you came to me at this time, and again I couldn't do anything, I decided that enough was enough. Hoping you directly may not be precisely in my job description, but it does feel a lot more like being a guardian." Gine sat next to him, pulling Gohan into her lap and stroking his hair as she molded over. From where they were sitting, they could see nothing but flowers and grass waving at the clouds overhead like old friends. "Do you think we have a chance?" she asked after a few minutes. It was several minutes before he answered. "Yes, with Kakarot, and all he would have learned from King Kai, I think we stand a good chance." It wasn't the unqualified enthusiasm Gine had been hoping for, but she felt comforted anyway. If Kami thought they had a chance, then they did. End of story. She didn't let herself wonder if a god could lie. They all felt it at the same time, looking up from what they were doing to stare at the sky.
What is that?"
Gohan asked in a tiny voice. Gine felt her hackles raise. "It's them." "Already?" Yamcha asked in alarm. "I thought we had another day." "I miscalculated," Kami growled. "I'm sorry, everyone." "It's not your fault," Tenshinhan said, stretching out his shoulders. "One day wouldn't have made that much of a difference anyway. Everyone ready?" They started to give their assent, and then the balance of the world tilted. Everything suddenly felt wrong, like an important piece of a block tower had been unceremoniously yanked away, leaving the rest wobbling and about to fall. "What?" Chi-Chi grasped, putting a hand to her mouth. Chaozu gasped, and Gine felt her blood began to boil. A whole city, gone in an instant. It was nothing she hadn't felt before, but this time was different. This time, those people had been sitting on the periphery of her awareness for decades, and to find them suddenly gone was like a cold spot in her soul. "They've already started," she said. "We have to go now. Ready or not, come on!" She took to the air, slicing through it at top speed without waiting to see if the others were following. She could feel them struggling to keep up, but she didn't wait for them. How many more were the Saiyans going to kill before they got to them? But it turned out she didn't need to worry. About halfway to the ruined city, she felt them coming directly towards her, doubtless letting the scouters guide them to their highest power level in the area. It seemed she had some amount of choice in their meeting place, so she landed at the nearest spot that looked promising, a wilderness area with flat open ground and small hillocks. The others landed around her a minute or so later. "Why did you stop?" Chi-Chi demanded. "They're coming right for us," Tenshinhan said. "This is as good a place as any to meet them." And in a few minutes, two figures slowly descended from the sky, landing in front of them. The bigger one is exactly who she'd been expecting, though he'd lost all his hair in the interim. She'd seen them around, all that kind of stuff, especially when she'd been running with Bardock and his crew, but they never exchanged words. He was powerful, but if they all fought together, not impossible to take down. They never get a chance to do that, though, because standing next to him was the face Gine had seen in every nightmare she had for the last year, Vegeta IV, Prince of the Saiyans, and he was staring right back at her. Red Dragon. Okay, right, one sec. Right sec, okay. Good job, Red Dragon. Don't worry, guys. I'll be right back. I'm just dealing with all of this nonsense. Alright. Okay.
Well, that guy was a no good Nick.
Sorry about that, everyone. Unfortunately, my tablet right here is just way too slow to keep up with that. So yeah, Red Dragon, I put that on for 60 seconds, so yeah. Sorry about that, guys. We're going to have to put it on slow mode. But there's only one chapter left anyway, so yeah, we're almost done. Yeah, no, basically, I think we'll need to get a couple more moderators in. So, we'll definitely look into it. But yeah, thanks guys for telling them to go away. You guys are solid. And also, in the meantime, Justin Holt, thank you very much for the super sticker. Red Dragon says, song M is for muted mic during the chapter, I is for ignorance, C is for can't listen, can't lip read, down here in the chat of Livestream. Good to have your voice back. Yeah, sorry about that, Carthu. Can you guys tell Carthu that, sorry, I just don't have access to the chat while I'm reading? So unfortunately, that's the case. Yeah, so just to let you know, Carthu, your offer was very much appreciated. I couldn't respond in time. Anyway, here we go. That was the Saiyan threat, guys. That was the Saiyan threat all along. Anywho, let's get on. This is the final chapter, guys. And this isn't the final chapter, obviously, but this is the one that Megane-chan's got up to. Alright, here we go. Chapter 17. Past and Present. When Gine was 5 years old, someone had challenged the king. She didn't remember his name now. Something like Orba or Onyo. But he'd been huge, dome-headed and hairy, and rumoured to have a power level close to that of the king. Vegeta III had ascended the throne only a few years before, and this was his first challenger, so everyone had shown up to watch. At 5 years old and perpetually hungry, Gine hadn't cared much about the fighting so much as the crowd. A bunch of feasting Saiyans might drop quite a few crumbs that an enterprising urchin could pick up, and the crowd had been so dense that day that by the time the king entered the ring, Gine was almost full. Perhaps the lessening of her hunger was why she remembered him so clearly. Tall, straight-backed and noble, he'd strode onto the raised platform without paying his opponent the slightest bit of attention. An attendant had taken his cape and armour, and Gine hadn't noticed them exchange a few words that had the attendant grinning. Then the king had turned around and, without wasting any time posturing or making speeches, speared his head straight through the challenger's chest. There was a split second of utter silence, then the deafening roar of the crowd, masking the sounds of King Vegeta, pulling the man's heart out of his chest, strings of gore and arteries offering little resistance. Once it was free, he held it above his head, and the crowd somehow managed to roar even louder. The heart was still pulsing, dripping blood onto the king's face and down his arm. One droplet landed on the corner of his mouth, and he licked it away. Oddly, Gine couldn't remember how she felt at the time, whether she'd been horrified, excited, or just disappointed the crowd broke up so soon. All she could remember was that she spent the next 2 hours dodging the street urchins as she picked up what food remained, and that there was so much of it there had been enough and to spare for all of them. Every time she recalled it afterward, though, the memory unsettled her. A sensation that was what was so upsetting. Violence like that was, if not routine, then nothing uncommon. When she was older, however, she realized that as the king, Vegeta represented everything a Saiyan was supposed to be. Bloodthirsty, merciless, powerful. In other words, everything she wasn't. As she got older and the gap between where she was and where she was supposed to be only got wider and more obvious, it no longer mattered who ridiculed her. It was always the king's face she saw sneering, his voice she had heard taunting her, and in her nightmares, his hand pulling her heart out of her chest in retribution for having dared be born a a Saiyan and being a poor example of one. Vegeta glanced away from Gine, his mocking smile growing marginally larger before he did, and addressed Kami. "Bit far from home, aren't you, Namekian?" Gine was relieved to have heard the prince's gaze directed elsewhere, but now she had some space to really look at him, she found herself somewhat underwhelmed. He was clean-shaven, unlike his father, but the differences didn't end there. He was shorter, and his bearing was arrogant rather than noble, mocking rather than self-assured. He seemed small, in a way that had nothing to do with his height. A schoolyard bully rather than a tyrant. His aura was massive, of course, but in every other way, he was not the nightmare she'd been expecting. Kami addressed him mildly. "Earth is my home, and I must kindly ask you to leave it. You are not welcome here." Vegeta's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Ho! Did you hear that, Nappa? We're not welcome. We've been kindly asked to leave. What do you say to that, big guy?" Nappa grinned. "I heard Namekians don't have bones. I want to rip his arms off to see." Vegeta turned back to Kami, spreading his hands. "How's that answer for you, slug?" But Kami did no more than nod. "Illuminating. Now, to be perfectly clear, what exactly are your intentions in coming here?" "You want me to be clear? Very well." Vegeta spoke slowly, enunciating his words. "We are here to kill every thinking being on this planet, and then sell it for profit." He glanced at Gine and Gohan. "We are also here for Kakarot, his dam and his whelp. Speaking of which, where is he? Too cowardly to show up?" Gohan clenched his fists.
My daddy's not a coward. He's coming, and when he gets here, he's gonna beat you up.
Turning to Gohan in mock surprise, Vegeta addressed him in a sickening version of baby speak. "Oh, it does talk! And who's your mummy, little boy? Did Kakarot climb back up the family tree to have you? Or did he rut with the local wildlife instead?" Ha! Gine felt her tail bristle around her waist, almost before the words had penetrated. She heard the others murmur invectives, but she couldn't hear them over the sound of her heart in her ears. Chi-Chi clapped her hands over Gohan's ears and shouted at Vegeta.
"You shut your dirty mouth or I'll shut it for you!"
Vegeta grinned slowly, an open-mouthed, delighted, wicked thing that made nearly everyone in the assembled group take a small step backwards. "And here I thought this planet might be boring. Nappa, how many Cybermen do you have left?"
"Ha! I like the way you think, Vegeta. Let me see."
Nappa held out a small bottle, giving it a shake.
"Looks like we got, 6.
"That's perfect. One for each of the riffraff. You, woman." He lifted his chin at Gine. "Get over here and watch the show. Bring the boy with you." Gine snarled in lieu of an answer. Vegeta didn't seem surprised. "Suit yourself. Go ahead, Nappa." Gine watched helplessly as he planted the 6 seeds, watering them in turn. She could kick the bottle out of his hands and destroy the seeds before they had a chance to grow, but that was assuming Nappa didn't swat her out of the sky before she reached him. Besides, they needed to buy time for Kakarot to arrive. He'd be on his way back now, but there was no telling how long it would take him to get here. The longer Vegeta spent toying with them, the better. "What are—" Krillin started, but then the Cybermen began to sprout. 6 small mounds swelled the earth, and then collapsed as 6 wrinkled green heads emerged from the ground with a squelching sound that made Yamcha wince. Chi-Chi shuddered and wiped her hands on her dress. "Kill all of them except that one and that one," Vegeta instructed the Cybermen, pointing at Gine and Gohan. "You are not to touch them. Understand?" The Cybermen in response, and then leapt. It was over in seconds, though it felt a little longer, especially when everyone was moving at super speed. Gine gripped both Gohan's shoulders as the others fought. Tenshinhan took out his opponent in 2 blows. Chaozu froze in his place, which let Chi-Chi slice through it as well as hers with a Keyblade. Chi-Chi vaporized his with a massive Ki attack. Krillin. And Kami dispatched his opponent with such clean efficiency that the Cybermen in question probably hadn't even noticed it was dead. Only Yamcha had trouble. Typical. Yamcha, duck! Gine shouted as the last Cyberman, perhaps sensing it was doomed anyway, leapt at him, preparing for a kamikaze attack. Yamcha dutifully ducked, and the Cybermen sailed over him, exploding in mid-air. Whoa! Yamcha breathed, standing up and following the explosion trail with wide eyes. He turned to Gine and gave her a shaky thumbs up. Thanks, ma'am! Vegeta spat. Useless. What the? Nappa gaped, blinking rapidly as he looked from Earthling to Earthling, before finally turning to Vegeta in shock. I thought this planet was supposed to be full of weaklings, Vegeta! Vegeta was frowning thoughtfully at Gine, and did not answer his subordinate for a moment. Probably old information, he said, finally looking away from her. Looks like you get a chance to stretch your legs after all. Surprise quickly gave way to delight, and Nappa stepped forward, punching his open hand several times. Yay! Which one of you wants to die first? Whew! Alright, okay. And that is all we have. That is basically it. So, with Sans, let's just say Bulma went full Batman contingency plan on every member of the Z Fighters. How would you take each and every one of them down? I'll start off with an easy one. Cold Gun to freeze Piccolo. Probably with the tails and stuff like that. Probably with the Red Ribbon Army, probably use some kind of tech to overdo them. She'd have tech, obviously. With Goku, probably the tail thing. Just kind of keep him, like, locked up with it, you know, hanging by his tail in that way. Keep him subdued. That kind of stuff. Alright, okay. Last drink of the jug. Oh, it's fresh. And there we go. So, alright guys. So, don't worry. If you keep an eye on Megane-chan 720's fanfiction over on fanfiction.net, I'll leave a link to it somewhere, then you guys can keep tabs on when there are going to be brand new chapters afoot. So, thank you all so much for what we got. Yeah. I know the mute chapter's going to become a meme. Yeah, I will do all my discussions and what ifs speaking in mime from now on. That's basically what we're doing here. So, no, in seriousness, I'll go back through it and I'll trim it out. So that means people, Logan, no, they're still doing it. They're still continuing. And we're not even at part 4 yet. There's plenty to go through. So, yeah. Thank you all so much, everybody. And, I will go and try and rectify the situation accordingly. But, yeah, thank you all so much for your support. And thank you so much for your contributions. It really helps out a lot. It really helps the channel keep going. But anyway, stay safe out there. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. And until next time, guys, catch you later. Hope you're well.